Hey guys, Paul here, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm taking you along with me on another Northern Ontario scuba diving adventure. This time, we're heading into the beautiful and remote wilderness of the unorganized Northeastern District of Cochrane, Ontario, to explore a lake that I've been wanting to get underwater in for quite some time. Welcome to Ann Lake. This is one of those places that really makes you appreciate just how untouched beauty we have here in Northern Ontario. Clear water, dense forest, wildlife, and that feeling of being completely removed from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. And for this adventure, we decided not to just make a quick day trip out of it. We brought the camper, packed up the gear, brought the dogs, and decided to settle in for a couple of weekends. After all, when you get beautiful August weather in Northern Ontario, why not make the absolute most of it? Our first weekend at Ann Lake was a bit of a family and friends getaway. While everyone else was enjoying the lake from above, we had paddle boards out, people swimming, rope swinging, and just enjoying the water the way you normally would on a beautiful summer weekend. But, of course, I had another idea. While everyone was enjoying the lake from the surface, I wanted to see what was happening underneath it. And honestly, that's one of the things I love most about scuba diving. You can visit the exact same lake your entire life, swim in it, fish in it, paddle across it, and enjoy it from the shoreline. But once you put on a mask and a regulator and go underneath the surface, you realize there's an entirely different world down there. And that's exactly what I wanted to explore. One of the things that really intrigued me about Ann Lake was the information I had heard from locals and people who have spent time fishing in the area. Apparently, Ann Lake is stocked with rainbow trout, which are one of the primary predator fish in the lake. So naturally, I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, I would get lucky and come across one during the dive. Unfortunately, I didn't spot any rainbow trout on either of my dives. That doesn't mean there wasn't life down there. I came across several schools of minnows moving through the shallows, some pretty strange looking aquatic bugs, a couple of crayfish, and plenty of underwater vegetation. And then there were the trees, lots and lots of fallen trees. That's one of the things I really enjoyed about diving Ann Lake. The bottom wasn't just an empty, featureless landscape. There were branches, fallen trees, vegetation, and structures scattered throughout the areas as I explored. And when you're swimming through something like that underwater, it gives the lake a completely different character. It almost feels like you're exploring a little underwater forest. According to the nautical charts, Lake Ann reaches a maximum depth of approximately 72 feet. Now, just because a lake reaches 72 feet doesn't mean I'm going anywhere near that depth on these dives. When I'm diving solo, I stay well within my recreational limits and keep my dives relatively shallow. For these dives, I was generally hanging around 15 to 30 foot range. And honestly, that's where I prefer to be in these types of lakes. There's usually more light, there's often more vegetation, you have a better chance of seeing wildlife, and for me, there's simply more to look at. The deeper I go in these lakes, the less wildlife and vegetation I tend to see. The water gets darker, the temperature drops, and eventually you're spending more time looking at the bottom than actually exploring anything. So for me, staying shallow makes these dives much more enjoyable. Now, one thing I want to talk about with these dives is navigation. When you're diving in a lake where visibility isn't particularly great, navigation becomes extremely important. And when you're diving solo, you have to take that responsibility even more seriously. Before entering the water, I like to establish a general navigation plan. I'll look at the shoreline, check my compass, look at my computer, take note of landmarks, and have a general idea of where I want to go before I even get underwater. Because once you descend, things can look very different. You lose the ability to simply look around and figure out where you are. You can't always see the shoreline. You may not be able to see very far in front of you. And once everything around you starts looking the same, it becomes very easy to lose your sense of direction. That's why I like to use my shoreline as a reference whenever possible. A typical dive for me starts by swimming out from shore to a desired location. Usually I'll drop down somewhere around 50 to 100 feet from shore and descend to approximately 20 feet. Once I'm at the bottom, I'll follow the shoreline while keeping track of my direction with my compass. I'm not relying on just one thing. I'm constantly paying attention to my surroundings, my compass, my computer, my depth, my time, and recognizable landmarks. And those landmarks can be anything: a large fallen tree, a particular rock formation, a change in the bottom, a sandy area, or even a specific section of vegetation. Anything that can help you recognize where you are, because when you're underwater, those little details can make a huge difference. The following weekend, I decided to try something a little different. Instead of starting from the same area, I swam out toward the small sandy island across the lake. Once I reached the area around the island, I started my dive and headed northwest. Again, I stayed relatively shallow and worked my way along the bottom. And once again, the underwater landscape was really interesting. The trees, vegetation, minnows, and little creatures moving around made it feel like a completely different environment from what you see above the surface. Eventually, it was time to turn around and make my way back. And once again, I managed to navigate my way back to the landing. And for me, that's what these types of dives are all about. Not necessarily going deep, not necessarily finding something spectacular. Sometimes it's simply about exploring, learning, practicing, and becoming more comfortable in an environment where your visibility and senses are limited. These Northern Ontario lakes are fantastic places to practice just that. Another thing I really enjoyed about these dives was seeing the fallen trees underwater. There's something really fascinating about seeing something that normally exists above the surface become a part of an underwater environment. You'll see trees lying across the bottom, branches covered in vegetation, and small fish moving through the structure. It almost creates its own little ecosystem. And every time I see something like this underwater, it makes me think about the history of the area. How long has that tree been there? What did the shoreline look like years ago? How many people have stood on this exact piece of shoreline? How many generations of fish have lived in this lake? And what has this lake looked like over the decades? That's one of the reasons I love exploring these places. I feel connected to nature when I'm underwater. And maybe it's because I grew up around Northern Ontario lakes. As a kid, I always was curious about what was underneath the surface. You could jump into a lake, swim around, and look down into the water, but you could never really see everything. That was always the question. What's down there? Scuba diving gives me the opportunity to finally answer that question, and sometimes the answer is pretty simple. It's trees, it's rocks, it's vegetation, it's minnows, it's crayfish, it's bugs. But sometimes you find something unexpected, and that's what keeps me coming back. One thing that really surprised me about Ann Lake was how clean it was. Considering how remote this location is, I really wasn't expecting to find much garbage underwater, and thankfully there wasn't much. I did come across a few fishing lures, a couple beer bottles, and what looked like a homemade anchor, but overall the lake was remarkably clean. And that's something I really appreciate about exploring these remote Northern Ontario lakes. You can get underneath the surface and see an environment that hasn't been heavily impacted by people. It really makes you stop and appreciate how important it is to protect these places, because once you see what these lakes look like from below, you realize just how much there is to lose. And of course, scuba diving wasn't the only thing that we did during our weekends at Ann Lake. After getting out of the water, we spent some time enjoying everything else the area had to offer. We took the dogs out for a run, we did some blueberry picking, and this year happened to be a really good season for wild blueberries in our part of Northern Ontario. So naturally, we had to take advantage of that. We also got out on the ATVs and explored the surrounding area, and honestly, that's what makes these trips so enjoyable. The diving is a huge part of it for me, but it's really the entire experience. You wake up in the morning, step outside the camper, and you're surrounded by forest. You spend the day on the water, you go exploring, you take the dogs out, you ride the ATVs, you pick blueberries, you sit around the campfire, and eventually you realize you're not thinking about work, traffic, phones, or anything else. You're just enjoying where you are. And Northern Ontario has an incredible ability to do that.
And nothing ever stops your dreams, but you're all I need, honestly. I just wanted you.
Ann Lake definitely didn't disappoint. Even though I didn't find the rainbow trout I was hoping to see, I still came away from these dives with a really enjoyable experience. I got to explore a new lake, I got some valuable navigation practice, I got to see the underwater environment from a completely different perspective, and most importantly, I got to spend a couple amazing weekends outdoors with family and friends. And that's really what these adventures are all about. It's not always about finding something spectacular. Sometimes it's about discovering something new in a place that's been there all along. A lake that thousands of people might simply see as a place to swim or fish can become an entirely different world when you put a regulator in your mouth and descend below the surface. And that's what keeps me coming back. Well guys, that's going to do it for this adventure. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me to Ann Lake and getting a little glimpse of what lies beneath the surface. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with anyone else who loves scuba diving in Northern Ontario, camping, or exploring the outdoors. And definitely let me know in the comments, where should I dive next? Until the next adventure, keep exploring, stay safe, and I'll see you guys underwater. Take care.